right, so what you see behind me is two completely different Fox bodies. In fact, the interior is completely different as well. One built like it was old school, one with a little bit of technology. So we're gonna go over which one's better for your application, and then you can decide which one's better for your Fox body. So let's start with the most obvious difference, and that's gonna be the look. This looks completely different. In fact, I remember growing up, because I've had Fox bodies since I was 16, whenever you're driving around town and you saw a big 5-inch tack on somebody's dash, they wanted to party. So one of the first mods you always did with a Fox body was get an aftermarket Autometer tachometer, because once you add a gear ratio and the motor's revving quicker, the factory tachometer in these cars absolutely stinks. It's not even close to being accurate. So the Autometer tach goes right to the distributor and it's gonna give you the most accurate RPM possible. But it was one of those cool little things that you knew somebody was serious and they were gonna go stoplight to stoplight with you if you had one of these Autometer tachometers. Now, as the car progresses, you start adding more gauges, and I originally had an 8-pillar gauge. So they fit in there real nice and neat. The problem was, as the car started progressing and it started going faster, well, I need to upgrade from a 6-point cage to a full 8-point cage in the car, which meant I couldn't have my gauges on the 8-pillar anymore. So you move them over to the Autometer gauge mount for the roll cage. It's a little complicated looking. My wife doesn't really approve of it, but then again, she doesn't really approve of anything on this car, but it allows me to see the oil pressure, water, and the air fuel. Hooking them up isn't too bad. You got to make sure you wire them. They each come with individual positives and negatives. Now, if it's something you're planning ahead, well, then you can easily splice them together and run one main positive or one main negative to your variety of gauges. Now, some people, they actually went in and messed with the dash, the whole entire cluster, changing those. That was a complicated process. And me, while this sounds completely irrational, I wanted the car looking somewhat stock. It's why I still got stock seats in the car. I still got stock back seats. So I didn't want to hack up the inside of the dash, even though I thought maybe I tastefully added some external gauges to watch vitals, oil pressure, water, and obviously engine speed. But I'm a little old school. I like my fuel leaded, I like my camshaft solid, and I just like that old school rumble. Yes, the digital dash is really cool. Kind of goes with the Coyote swaps, which are super popular in these cars nowadays. But like I said, I'm a little more old school. This to me is a little bit more period correct for the car, and it's ultimately why I chose to go that route.
Okay, here we are with the Autometer InVision Digital Dash. So I remember when these things first came out a couple years ago, I was pretty excited with how they looked, and I couldn't wait to get my hands on one to try one out personally, and here we are. We finally got one in this car, and I love the way it looks. The screen brings it up to date. Hooking it up is pretty easy. The hardest part about it, in my opinion, because I'm a wiring guy, is just getting the factory plugs undone and the factory speedometer cable. Once that's off, the factory stuff comes out. This bolts back in. It's got about 14 wires to hook up. The good thing about this is you're not plugging in a power, a ground, and an ignition for each individual gauge. It's just one and done to power the whole unit. And then after that, you're just tapping into factory gauges for speed, fuel level, oil pressure. Volts works automatically. It comes with a couple different sending units. It's just hooking up one part instead of several. But I guess depending on your wiring ability and whether you have a manual or not will determine where you catch the wires. We were able to catch everything inside the car, chasing the factory wires in the column and in the kick panel. Some people may have to run them to the speed sensor and out to the battery to catch power. It all depends on what you have for your resources. This kit also comes with pretty much everything you'll need. The only thing we had to source on our own was the 1/4-inch NPT pipe for the oil pressure sending unit. So once this is installed, you can scroll through the menus and easily select gauge scale for RPM, for example. You can set it from 0 to 8,000 or 0 to 10,000, depending on how far you want to go it. In most push rods, you're not going to need to go to 10,000. This is an 87 to 93, so there will be variances. The fuel sending unit, it'll go by ohms, and you'll set the cluster per the sending unit you have in the tank. When we calibrated the speedometer, we had to measure out a 2-mile distance. Obviously, we had to do that in a vehicle that had a working speedometer and odometer at the time. So we got to the starting point, we came to a complete stop, pressed go on our little multifunction knob, started recording the drive, and once we got to the 2-mile mark, I clicked the button, hit stop, and the speedometer, boom, popped right up to where we were going. So once everything is calibrated, the Digital Dash has 5 different screen options. I prefer 4. Some of those screens actually have different color options as well. But you can pick the one you like the most and run that one. You can switch them as often as you want. Then once you get that sorted out, you also have the ability to choose different warning points as far as voltage, fuel level, and other features. And with the warnings, not only do you get a visual of it, you'll also get a tone from it as well if you can hear it over your exhaust. However, if you don't want the audible tones, you can always turn that off as well because it's adjustable just like everything else in the menus.
So one thing to keep in mind is with the analog style gauges, they are a little bit more customizable, meaning you can get your water, your boost, you can get exhaust gas temps, you can get a bunch of different gauges to completely customize it to your liking. But if you go to add things later on, then you're usually splicing into wires, doing some jerry rigs like I found when I rebuilt the wiring on my car a couple years ago. So that's a little bit more complicated, but the ease of installation with the Digital Dash, and it is kind of more permanent. You can't go and switch out some of those features. Like I can't take my fuel level and turn it into a boost gauge. If you're gonna be running boost, you're still gonna need a dedicated boost gauge. But overall, for simplicity and the way it looks, you really can't beat that new Digital Dash from Autometer. One thing to keep in mind about the Digital Dash is you're gonna have functioning water, oil pressure. So immediately I could have gotten rid of 2 of these gauges. And it's got a more accurate tachometer, so get that out of the picture. So you've got the majority of your gauges nicely tucked in there, but later on maybe you want to add an Autometer air fuel gauge. That's when you can always add something on later. So you're not just stuck with what you're getting with the Digital Dash.
So who is this for? It's probably not quite for the purists or the hardcore race guys. It doesn't have relay triggers. There's certain things it doesn't have that the hardcore race gauges do have, but it does have a nice factory fit, a nice customizable display, and it'll bring your Fox body into the modern era. Personally, I like it. I think it gives it a nice clean look. It's probably really good for the guy who's gonna drive his car every day. It's good for racing. It just doesn't have the relay triggers and stuff like that that the Pro Comp gauges have. So I remember years back when I was getting my GT set up, I went with mostly digital gauges in my car. I wound up building my own custom gauge cluster and setting it back there and thinking, oh man, this thing looks really cool. And then a few years later, I remember looking through Facebook and seeing the Autometer InVision start popping up, and I'm like, oh, that'd be a great option for my car. It ties into all the factory gauges, which would have saved me a lot of time. The only thing it doesn't have is, being that it's designed for all factory equipment, is it doesn't have a boost gauge or an air fuel gauge. My car's a turbo car, so I need those. So I would need some sort of pillar mount for those gauges, and then I can keep all the factory stuff in the cluster. Also, the price point on these isn't very bad at all if you think about it. If you were to actually replace all your factory gauges with aftermarket gauges and the surround for them, you'd be roughly at about the same price depending on which gauge series you went with. You could also go the route I went. I bought all the gauges individually and made my own surround for them that fit into the factory cluster pretty good. It does save you a couple $100s to do it that way, but it is quite a bit of work. So all in all, the install is pretty easy. I have faith in all you Fox Body guys out there can get it done. It just takes a little bit of wiring know-how. You can easily get this done in a weekend, maybe less, and it'll give you that factory fit as well as the Autometer accuracy and reliability. So now that you know a little bit more about it, let us know what you think in the comments below. Did we ruin it? Did we improve it? We're really excited to get this thing back in Dario's hands and see what he thinks about it.
Now, if you check out the Autometer website, you've literally got hundreds of options for your gauges. I went with the Sport Comp gauges in black over here. This one's silver. That's a long story. It was actually in my early days at Steeda. It was a return. It came back to us damaged. Turns out the warehouse manager cut me a deal at the time and said, if you pay cost for it, you could take home a new tachometer. So doesn't match, but there's hundreds of options up there on the Autometer site, so check it out. They've got a bunch of great products. It's actually one of the first vendors that Steeda brought on back in the late 1980s, because from a racing standpoint and from a performance standpoint, you demanded better gauges. You know, one of the old tricks about a Fox body, and I actually noticed this on the way to college one time, is the cars run warmer if you have the headlights on. What? And so I'm like geeking out, I'm trying to figure this, and I'm thinking, well, the air box is in the fender, maybe the bulb's generating some heat, it's sucking in the hotter air and the car's gonna run hotter. Absolutely not. It was some sort of electrical glitch in the Fox bodies that when you turned on the headlights, slowly but surely your temperature gauge creeped up a little bit on you. Dan Carlson, you're the one that taught me that. So you want aftermarket gauges. It's why Dario brought them on board in Steeda back in the 1980s, and we've been dealing with them for over 35 years. So hit like, subscribe, check them out on our website, as well as fantastic other products by Autometer and thousands of other vendors. And remember, Steeda, where speed matters.